The wrought iron gates of the Whitmore estate opened with a mechanical hum that made Clara Jenkins grip her cleaning supplies tighter. She'd never worked in a house this grand, not in all her 28 years. The limestone mansion rose 3 stories high, with ivy crawling up its eastern wall like nature itself was trying to claim something so beautiful it couldn't quite be real. Clara had been cleaning houses since she was 19, putting herself through community college one semester at a time before life got in the way. Her mother's medical bills, her younger brother's tuition, dreams had a way of folding themselves into neat, forgotten squares when reality demanded attention. But this job paid 3 times her usual rate, and the agency had been insistent. The Whitmore estate needed someone immediately, someone discreet, someone who could start today. The woman who answered the door was stunning in that effortless way that came with money and good genes. Victoria Ashford wore cream silk like it was denim, her honey blonde hair swept into a casual updo that probably took 30 minutes to achieve. She was 29 but carried herself with the confidence of someone who'd never been told no. "You must be Clara," Victoria said, her smile not quite reaching her crystal blue eyes. "Come in. I'll show you around." The interior was just as breathtaking as the exterior: marble floors, soaring ceilings, artwork that looked like it belonged in museums. Clara tried not to gawk as Victoria led her through room after room, explaining the cleaning schedule with the kind of precision that suggested she'd planned this conversation. "Mr. Whitmore is away on business," Victoria said as they reached the kitchen. "He travels frequently for his tech investments. Sometimes he's gone for weeks." She handed Clara a key ring. "You'll have access to most of the house, but the basement is strictly off-limits. It's full of expensive equipment and old files." "Insurance reasons." Clara nodded, pocketing the keys. She'd learned long ago not to ask questions in houses like this. Rich people had their peculiarities, their secrets, their rooms they didn't want the help to see. The first week passed in a blur of dusting, polishing, and trying to remember which cleaning products Victoria preferred for which surfaces. Victoria was particular, hovering nearby during those initial days, watching with an intensity that made Clara's skin prickle. But by the second week, she'd relaxed, often disappearing for hours to meet friends or attend yoga classes, leaving Clara alone in the vast, echoing house. It was during the 3rd week that Clara first heard it. She'd been mopping the hallway near the basement door when she paused, certain she'd heard something. A sound. Muffled, distant, but definitely there. She tilted her head, listening. There it was again, a rhythmic thumping, like something heavy being knocked against a wall. Pipes, she told herself. Old houses made sounds. She'd cleaned enough of them to know that every mansion had its groans and whispers. But the sound came again the next day. And the day after that. Always from behind the basement door. On Thursday of the 4th week, Clara stood outside that door for a full 5 minutes, her hand on the knob, Victoria's warning echoing in her mind. She turned away. It wasn't her business. She needed this job. Friday changed everything. Victoria had left for the weekend. A spa retreat in the Berkshires, she'd said, air-kissing near Clara's cheek, and the house felt different in her absence. Less like a museum, more like a place where secrets lived in the walls. Clara was cleaning the hallway again when she heard it. Not the thumping this time, but something else. A voice. Weak, hoarse, but unmistakably human, calling out. Help. The word was barely audible. Please. Her heart hammered against her ribs. Every instinct screamed at her to walk away, to pretend she'd heard nothing. She thought of her mother, of the steady paycheck, of all the reasons she couldn't afford to lose this position. The voice came again, more desperate. Is someone there? Clara's hand moved before her mind could catch up, pulling out the key ring, finding the one marked basement. It slid into the lock with a soft click that sounded like a line being crossed, a boundary being shattered. The basement stairs descended into darkness. She fumbled for a light switch, found it, and harsh fluorescent bulbs flickered to life, revealing concrete steps leading down. The air smelled stale, wrong. Hello, she called, her voice shaking. Down here. The voice was stronger now, rough with disuse. Please, I need help. She descended slowly, each step a small rebellion against common sense. At the bottom, she found herself in a finished basement, but this wasn't storage. There was a bed, a bathroom, a small table. And in the corner, a man sat handcuffed to a heavy radiator pipe. He looked up at her with eyes that might have been sharp once, but were now clouded with exhaustion. Dark stubble covered his jaw, his hair was unkempt, and his clothes, expensive clothes, she noted, hung loose on a frame that had clearly lost weight. But even in this state, there was something about him, a presence that filled the room. "Who are you?" Clara whispered. The man's laugh was bitter. "I'm James Whitmore, and I own this house." Clara stared at the man chained to the radiator, her mind struggling to reconcile what she was seeing with what she'd been told. This couldn't be James Whitmore. James Whitmore was on a business trip. James Whitmore was closing deals in Singapore or Dubai or wherever billionaires close deals. This man was a prisoner. "That's impossible," she said, though the words felt hollow even as she spoke them. Ms. Ashford said. "Victoria." He spoke the name like it tasted of poison. "My fiancée." "How long has she been telling people I'm traveling?" "A month. Since I started working here." Clara's hands trembled as she pulled out her phone. "I'm calling the police." "Wait." His voice was sharp enough to make her pause. "Please. Just wait." He took a breath, visibly trying to compose himself. "I know how this looks. I know you have no reason to trust me. But if you call the police right now, Victoria will disappear, and everything I've worked for will be gone with her. You're chained up in your own basement. What am I supposed to think?" "I think," he said carefully, "that you're a smart woman who knows something is very wrong here. I'm asking for 5 minutes. 5 minutes to explain, and then you can make whatever choice you need to make." Clara looked at him, really looked at him. His eyes, despite the exhaustion, held a desperate clarity. His hands, though dirty, bore the calluses of someone who'd worked, not just given orders. And there was something else, something in the way he held himself even in chains, that spoke of truth. 5 minutes, she said, lowering her phone but not putting it away. James Whitmore's story spilled out in a rush, as if he'd been rehearsing it in his head for weeks. He was 36, had built his fortune in tech investments, starting with nothing but a scholarship to MIT and a talent for seeing potential where others saw risk. He'd met Victoria at a charity gala 2 years ago, been swept up in her charm, her beauty, her apparent devotion to using wealth for good causes. "I proposed 6 months ago," he said, his voice cracking. "And something changed. She started asking about my businesses, my accounts, my passwords. She said she wanted to help, to be a real partner. I thought it was sweet." He'd been working from home the day it happened, about 5 weeks ago. Victoria had made him dinner, something she rarely did. He remembered feeling dizzy, the room spinning, and then nothing until he woke up here, chained and trapped. "She visits every few days," he said. "Brings food, water. Tells me she's filed the paperwork to become my power of attorney, that she's told everyone I'm on an extended business trip focusing on my mental health. By the time anyone questions it, she'll have transferred enough assets to disappear forever." Clara's phone felt heavy in her hand. "Why should I believe you?" "Check my ID. It's in my back pocket." She never bothered to take it. When Clara hesitated, he added, "Please. I'm asking you to verify, not to trust blindly." She approached cautiously, reaching into his pocket and pulling out a leather wallet. The driver's license showed the same face, cleaner and healthier, but unmistakable. James Robert Whitmore. Date of birth confirming he was 36. The address matching this house. "This could be stolen," she said, but her conviction was wavering. "Call my office. The number's on the card in there. Ask for Margaret Chen, my executive assistant. She's been with me for 12 years. Tell her the Harrington deal in 2019. She'll know it's really me." Clara found the card, dialed with shaking fingers. A crisp, professional voice answered. "Whitmore Investments, Margaret Chen speaking." "Hi, this is going to sound strange," Clara began. "I'm calling about James Whitmore. I need to verify something. Can you tell me about the Harrington deal in 2019? There was a pause. "Who is this?" Someone who needs to know if James Whitmore is really on a business trip. Another pause, longer this time. When Margaret spoke again, her voice was tight. The Harrington deal was our first major acquisition. Only 3 people knew the real terms: myself, Mr. Whitmore, and our lawyer. If you're asking about this, where is he? He's here. In his house. Clara looked at James. In his basement. Oh God. Margaret's voice cracked. Victoria said he needed privacy, that he was dealing with burnout. She's been signing documents as his power of attorney. I questioned it, but she had paperwork, medical reports about his mental state. How do I know you're telling the truth? Clara put the phone on speaker. Mr. Whitmore is here. He can speak to you. James leaned forward, as far as the chain would allow. Margaret, it's me. Code verification. November 13. First snowfall, hot chocolate. Mr. Whitmore? Margaret's voice flooded with relief and fury. What is happening? Victoria drugged me and locked me down here. She's been stealing from me for weeks. But we need to be smart about this. If we move too fast, she'll run with whatever she's already taken. He looked at Clara. I need help, but it has to be done carefully. Clara's mind raced. Everything in her life had taught her to avoid rich people's problems, to keep her head down and her hands clean. But this man was looking at her with hope in his eyes, not because she was the help, but because she was there, because she'd heard him when no one else had. What do you need? She asked. First, get me out of these cuffs. Victoria keeps the key in her bedroom, top drawer of her nightstand, inside a jewelry box. He paused. Then, we need to document everything before we make a move. The food she's been bringing, the dates, times. And we need to access my computer in the study to see what damage has been done. Clara looked at Margaret's name on the phone screen. Can you help? From your end. I'll start pulling transaction records, Margaret said immediately. And I'll contact our legal team discreetly. But ma'am, whoever you are, if this is real, you need to be careful. If Victoria realizes someone knows, there's no telling what she'll do. Clara ended the call and stood, decision crystallizing in her chest. She'd spent her whole life being invisible, being safe. Maybe it was time to be brave. I'll get the key, she said. And then we figure this out together. As she climbed the basement stairs, Clara realized she'd just made a choice that would change everything. Behind her, James Whitmore sat in his chains and, for the first time in weeks, felt something like hope. Victoria's bedroom was a monument to expensive taste, all white silk and silver accents, with a view of the manicured gardens that Clara had never been allowed to linger and admire. Now, standing at the threshold, she felt like an intruder in a different way than usual. This wasn't cleaning. This was crossing into dangerous territory. Her hands shook as she opened the nightstand drawer. Inside, among designer sleep masks and French hand cream, sat an ornate jewelry box. Clara lifted the lid and found it, a small silver key on a delicate chain, hidden beneath layers of pearls and diamonds worth more than Clara would make in 5 years. She pocketed the key and froze. What was she doing? She was a maid, not a hero. If Victoria came back early, if anyone found out what she was doing, you can do this. She whispered it to herself, the same words she'd said when her mother got sick, when the bills piled up, when life demanded more than she thought she had to give. She'd survived everything life had thrown at her. She could survive this. Back in the basement, James watched her descend with an intensity that made her nervous. She knelt beside him, the key feeling impossibly small in her palm. Thank you, he said quietly. You don't know what this means. I don't even know if I'm doing the right thing, Clara admitted, fitting the key into the handcuffs. You heard someone calling for help. You answered. That's always the right thing. The cuffs clicked open. James pulled his hands free, wincing as blood flow returned to his wrists. Raw skin, bruised and abraded, marked where the metal had bitten into him for weeks. He stood slowly, unsteady, grabbing the wall for support. When did she last bring food? Clara asked. Yesterday afternoon. She usually comes every 2 to 3 days. He rubbed his wrists carefully. We probably have at least until Sunday night before she returns from her spa weekend. That gives us time. Clara pulled out her phone, opening the camera. We need to document everything. The chains, your injuries, this room. Evidence. James nodded, and together they photographed everything. The makeshift prison, the handcuffs, the marks on his wrists, the minimal food supplies Victoria had been leaving. Clara's phone filled with images that told a story of calculated cruelty. Now we need to see what she's done to your accounts, Clara said. Can you make it upstairs? The climb was slow. James paused twice, breathing hard. One hand braced against the wall. Clara hovered nearby, ready to catch him if he fell. When they finally reached the main floor, he looked around his own home like a man seeing it for the first time. Cheery decorated, he said, staring at a painting that hadn't been there before. That's a Rothko. She bought a Rothko with my money. In the study, James settled into the leather chair behind his desk with a sigh that carried weeks of exhaustion. His computer hummed to life, and Clara watched his face shift from tired relief to mounting horror as he navigated through screens. $12 million, he whispered. She's moved $12 million into offshore accounts. And there are transfer authorizations pending for $15 million more, scheduled to process on Monday. Clara felt dizzy. She'd never even imagined that much money, let alone seen it stolen in real time. Margaret's pulling records too, James continued, fingers flying over the keyboard. Look at this. She's been forging my signature on documents for weeks. Power of attorney, medical evaluation claiming I'm mentally unfit, letters to business partners saying I'm taking a sabbatical. He slammed his fist on the desk, making Clara jump. She planned this perfectly. Can you stop the transfers? Not without alerting her. The accounts are monitored. If I cancel them, she'll get a notification. He leaned back, running his hands through his unkempt hair. We need to catch her in the act, with evidence that's undeniable. Otherwise, she'll claim I gave her access, that this was a misunderstanding, that I'm having a mental breakdown and imagining things. Clara pulled up a chair. So, what do we do? James looked at her, really looked at her for the first time since she'd freed him. Why are you helping me? You could have walked away. Should have walked away. I could ask you the same thing, Clara said. Why trust me? I'm just the maid. You're not just anything.
His voice was firm.
You're the person who heard me. The person who came down those stairs. That takes courage. Clara felt heat rise to her cheeks. I'm the person who needs this job. And I'm the person who can't stand by while someone hurts another person, rich or not. A ghost of a smile crossed James's face, the first she'd seen. Then let's make sure Victoria pays for what she's done. They worked through the afternoon, building their case. Margaret sent encrypted files documenting every suspicious transaction. James wrote detailed accounts of his captivity, time-stamped and specific. Clara provided her own witness statement, describing what she'd been told versus what she'd found. As evening shadows stretched across the study, James suddenly looked up. You've been here for hours. You should go home. This isn't your fight. It became my fight when I opened that basement door, Clara said. Besides, do you even have food in this house? Real food. James blinked. I don't know. Clara stood. I'll check the kitchen. When's the last time you had a real meal? Define real. That's what I thought. The kitchen was well stocked. Victoria apparently maintained appearances even when imprisoning her fiancé. Clara found fresh vegetables, good cuts of meat, quality bread. She started cooking, something simple but nourishing, while James continued working in the study. When she brought him a plate of herb-roasted chicken and vegetables, he stared at it like she'd presented him with treasure. I can't remember the last time someone cooked for me, he said quietly. Not as a service, but as a kindness. Everyone needs kindness, Clara said, especially when the world's trying to break them. They ate together in the study, two people from completely different worlds, united by circumstance and growing trust. James asked about her life, really asked, listening as she talked about her mother's illness, her brother's dreams of medical school, the way she'd put her own aspirations on hold. What did you want to be? He asked. Before life got in the way. A teacher, Clara admitted. Elementary school. I wanted to help kids who came from neighborhoods like mine see that they could be anything. You still could. With what time? What money? James was quiet for a moment. After this is over, if we succeed, I'd like to help with that. Not as payment. You don't owe me anything, and I'll pay you properly for your time regardless. But because the world needs more teachers like you would be. Clara's throat tightened. Let's focus on getting you your life back first. As night fell, they finalized their plan. James would stay hidden, gathering more evidence and coordinating with Margaret. Clara would continue her normal routine, keeping Victoria unsuspicious. And when Victoria returned Sunday night, they'd be ready. This is dangerous, James warned. If she realizes if she suspects anything. I know, Clara said. But some things are worth the risk. She left that night carrying more than her cleaning supplies. She carried the weight of a secret, the burden of a plan, and something else she couldn't quite name, a connection to a man who'd looked at her and seen not a maid, but an equal. Sunday was coming, and with it, a reckoning. Saturday dawned gray and uncertain, matching Clara's mood as she returned to the Whitmore estate. She'd barely slept, her mind churning through everything that could go wrong. But when James answered the door, showered, shaved, wearing clean clothes, she barely recognized him as the broken man she'd found yesterday. You look human again, she said. I feel human again. Well, mostly. He stepped aside to let her in. Margaret's been working overnight. Wait until you see what she found. In the study, James's laptop displayed a spider web of financial transactions that made Clara's head spin. Margaret appeared on a video call, her sharp features drawn with exhaustion but her eyes bright with purpose. Ms. Jenkins, I presume, Margaret said. Thank you for bringing our boss back from the dead. Clara, please, she said. And I just opened a door. You did a lot more than that. Margaret's expression was serious. I've been with James for 12 years, and I pride myself on reading people. I should have seen through Victoria. The signs were there, I just didn't want to look. She fooled everyone, James said. That's what good con artists do. Margaret nodded. Speaking of which, we've traced her background. Victoria Ashford isn't even her real name. She's Victoria Hastings, and she's done this before. 3 times, actually. Wealthy men, long engagements, mysterious disappearances of money. She's smart enough to settle out of court, take a payout, and move on before criminal charges stick. Clara felt ice in her stomach. So, she's done this to 3 other people? And gotten away with it every time, Margaret confirmed. But not this time. This time, we have evidence of kidnapping, forgery, and theft on a scale she's never attempted before. This time, she goes to prison. James stood, pacing to the window. The transfers are still set to process Monday morning. If we don't stop her before then, she'll have $27 million scattered across accounts we may never trace. So we stick to the plan, Clara said, trying to sound more confident than she felt. I act normal when she returns tomorrow. You stay hidden. We gather the final evidence we need. There's a complication, Margaret said. Victoria called my office yesterday. She wants to schedule a board meeting for Tuesday to discuss James's transition into medical retirement. She's moving faster than we thought. James's jaw tightened. Because the spa retreat was a cover. She's probably meeting with lawyers, finalizing her escape plan. The rest of Saturday passed in tense preparation. James installed security cameras in hidden locations, positioning them to capture Victoria's movements. Clara rehearsed her story. She knew nothing, suspected nothing, was just the hired help doing her job. You should practice looking surprised when you see her, James suggested. She'll expect some reaction to her coming home early. They ran through scenarios, with James playing Victoria, his impression of her clipped, entitled voice unsettlingly accurate. But as the afternoon wore on, their practice sessions devolved into something else. Conversations about life, dreams, the paths that had led them both to this moment. I never wanted to be just about money, James admitted as they sat in the kitchen, Clara insisting he eat another proper meal. My parents were immigrants. My father worked 3 jobs so I could go to college. He died my junior year, never got to see me graduate. He stared at his plate. Every business deal, every investment, I kept thinking, Dad would be proud. But somewhere along the way, I forgot what he was really proud of. That I was kind. That I helped people. You've helped people through your work, haven't you? Clara asked. I've made money for investors. It's not the same. He looked at her. You help people every day. You take care of your mother, support your brother, do work that matters even if society doesn't value it properly. That's real contribution. You sound like you're having an existential crisis. Being locked in a basement gives you time to think. He smiled, but it was sad. Victoria wasn't wrong about everything. I had become distant, obsessed with work. Maybe if I'd been more present, I would have seen who she really was. Don't do that, Clara said firmly. Don't blame yourself for someone else's cruelty. She made choices. Evil choices. That's on her, not you. James reached across the table, hesitated, then gently touched her hand. How are you so wise? I'm not wise. I've just survived enough to know that beating yourself up doesn't change anything. Moving forward does. Their hands stayed touching longer than necessary until Clara pulled back, suddenly aware of the intimacy of the moment. They were virtual strangers, thrown together by extraordinary circumstances. Whatever this was, gratitude, adrenaline, shared trauma. It couldn't be real. Could it? Sunday morning arrived with threatening clouds. Clara came early as planned and found James already awake, monitoring the security feeds on his laptop. She left the spa at 7 a.m., he reported. She should be back by early afternoon. Are you ready?
No.
But we're doing this anyway. Clara cleaned, forcing herself into the familiar rhythms of work, while James retreated to a guest room on the third floor that Victoria never used. They'd stocked it with water, food, and equipment he'd need to monitor everything from his hiding place. At 2:37 p.m., Victoria's Mercedes pulled into the driveway. Clara's heart hammered as she heard the front door open, heels clicking on marble. She was dusting the living room, keeping her back to the entrance, trying to look natural. Oh, you're still here. Victoria's voice carried its usual cool dismissal. I thought you'd be done by now. Clara turned, arranging her face into what she hoped was polite surprise. Ms. Ashford, I didn't expect you back until tomorrow. How was your retreat? Rejuvenating. Victoria set down her designer luggage, studying Clara with eyes that suddenly seemed sharper than before. Has everything been quiet while I was away? Very quiet. Just me and my cleaning supplies. Clara forced a smile. Same as always. Victoria walked closer, and Clara had to fight the urge to step back. This close, she could see the calculation in those blue eyes, the predatory intelligence that had fooled James and so many others. No strange noises? Nothing unusual? Just the house settling. Old places make sounds, you know. A long moment passed. Then Victoria smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. Of course. Well, I'm exhausted. I'll be in my room. You can finish up and go. Clara nodded, not trusting her voice. She watched Victoria climb the stairs, every instinct screaming danger. Upstairs, James watched through the hidden camera feed as Victoria entered her bedroom. She immediately pulled out her phone, making a call. It's me, she said to whoever answered. Everything's on schedule. The transfer's processed tomorrow morning, and by Tuesday afternoon, I'll be on a plane to Zurich. The medical retirement paperwork is ready for the board meeting. A pause. Yes, I'm sure. No one suspects anything. The maid is clueless, and James, well, James is exactly where I left him. James recorded every word, his hands clenched into fists. Victoria ended the call and walked to her nightstand, opening the drawer. James watched her face change as she saw the jewelry box. Open, disturbed. She grabbed it, saw the empty space where the key had been. Her expression shifted from confusion to fury to cold calculation in seconds. She spun toward the door, and James knew she was heading to the basement. He grabbed his phone, texting Clara one word. Now. Clara's phone buzzed. She saw the message, and her blood ran cold. Victoria's heels were already clicking down the hallway, moving fast, heading toward the basement door. This was it. The moment everything either worked or fell apart. Clara stepped into the hallway just as Victoria reached the basement door. "Miss Ashford? Is everything okay?" Victoria whirled, her face a mask of barely controlled rage. "Did you go into my bedroom? I cleaned it yesterday, like always."
Why?
"Is something wrong? Where is it?" Victoria's voice was ice. "Where's the key?" Clara forced confusion onto her face. "What key?" "Ms. Ashford, I don't understand." Victoria moved fast, grabbing Clara's arm hard enough to bruise. "Don't play games with me. Did you go in the basement? Did you let him out?" "Let who out? You're hurting me." "Where is he?" A voice from the top of the stairs answered. "I'm right here, Victoria." They both turned. James stood at the landing, phone in hand, looking every inch the billionaire. He was commanding, powerful, and very, very angry. Victoria's face went through a dozen emotions before settling on a smile that was almost convincing.
James.
"Thank God. I've been so worried. You're not well, darling. Let's get you back downstairs where you can rest." "Save it." James descended the stairs slowly, deliberately. "I know everything. The offshore accounts, the forged documents, the theft. All of it. You're confused. The medication. The only thing I was given was whatever drug you used to knock me out a month ago." He held up his phone. "And I just recorded your entire phone conversation about fleeing to Zurich." Victoria's mask finally slipped, revealing the cold calculation beneath. She still gripped Clara's arm, and now her fingers tightened like a vice. "You stupid girl. You should have minded your own business." "Let her go, Victoria." "Or what? You'll call the police?" "Go ahead. It's your word against mine." A mentally unstable man and his cleaning lady against a concerned fiancé trying to help. "Actually," Margaret's voice came from James's phone. "It's his word, Clara's word. 12 years of my testimony, documented evidence of your previous cons, and a recording of you admitting to fraud and planning to flee the country." Victoria's eyes darted between James, Clara, and the phone. Clara could see her mind working, calculating odds, looking for an angle. Then Victoria's hand moved toward her purse, and Clara saw the glint of metal. Everything happened in seconds. James lunged forward. Clara twisted free, stumbling backward. And Victoria pulled out not a weapon, but a syringe, the same drug she must have used before. "If I can't have the money," Victoria hissed, "then no one gets anything." She moved toward James, but Clara was faster. She grabbed a heavy crystal vase from the hallway table and swung it with all her strength, connecting with Victoria's arm. The syringe flew from her grip, shattering against the marble floor. Victoria screamed in rage, lunging at Clara, but James was there, pulling her back, wrestling her to the ground as she fought like a cornered animal. "Call 911, he shouted to Clara. Clara grabbed her phone with shaking hands, dialing as Victoria's screams echoed through the mansion. Outside, the clouds finally broke, rain beginning to fall like the whole world was weeping for the ugliness of human greed. By the time police sirens wailed up the driveway, Victoria had gone silent, her face blank with the realization that she'd finally been caught. As officers led her away in handcuffs, she looked at Clara with pure hatred. "You're just a maid," she spat. "You're nobody." Clara met her gaze steadily. "I'm the nobody who beat you." And as Victoria was pushed into the police car, Clara felt James's hand find hers, squeezing gently. They'd survived. Together. The days following Victoria's arrest passed in a surreal blur of police statements, lawyer consultations, and media frenzy. The story was too sensational not to leak. Billionaire tech investor held captive by his own fiancée, rescued by his housekeeper. Clara's phone exploded with interview requests, which she declined. James hired security to keep reporters off the property. Through it all, Clara kept coming to work. Not because she had to, James insisted she take paid leave, but because the alternative was sitting in her small apartment, watching her life become a circus on the news. You know you don't have to clean anymore, James said, finding her scrubbing the kitchen counters a week after Victoria's arrest. You're not my employee. I don't even know what to call you. My savior? My friend. Clara set down her sponge. I need normal. I need something that makes sense. Everything else is chaos. James understood. His life had become a controlled storm of damage control. Margaret worked overtime to reverse Victoria's financial manipulations. Lawyers filed criminal charges that would keep Victoria behind bars for decades. Business partners called with concern and support. The board demanded explanations. But in the quiet moments, James found himself seeking out Clara's presence. She had a way of cutting through the noise, of reminding him what mattered. The prosecution wants you to testify, he told her one afternoon. They'd fallen into a routine of sharing coffee in the kitchen after she finished cleaning. They say your testimony is crucial, but I told them I won't push you. You've already done more than anyone could ask. I'll testify, Clara said without hesitation. She needs to pay for what she did. Not just to you, but to the 3 men before you. Someone has to stop her. You're remarkable, you know that? Clara looked away, uncomfortable with praise. I just did what anyone would do.
No.
Most people would have walked away, would have decided it wasn't their problem. James leaned forward. I've been thinking a lot about second chances, about how you gave me one by opening that basement door. And I want to give you one too. What do you mean? Your teaching degree.
I meant what I said.
I want to help you finish it. He held up a hand before she could protest. Not as charity, as investment. I spent my whole career betting on potential, and Clara, you have more potential than any tech startup I've ever funded. Tears pricked Clara's eyes. I can't accept that. It's too much. It's not enough. You saved my life. You saved everything I've built. Let me do this. His voice softened. Please. Over the following weeks, something shifted between them. What had started as gratitude evolved into genuine friendship, and then, slowly, carefully, into something more. James found excuses to be wherever Clara was working. Clara found reasons to stay longer than necessary. They talked about everything. James shared stories of building his company from nothing, of the fear and exhilaration of those early days. Clara opened up about her childhood, about watching her mother work 3 jobs, about the dreams she'd carefully folded away. Your mom must be incredibly proud of you, James said one evening. They were in the study, ostensibly reviewing legal documents, but they'd spent the last hour just talking. I haven't told her everything, Clara admitted. She thinks I'm still just cleaning houses. I don't want her to worry. You should tell her. What you did took courage most people don't have. Clara smiled. You sound like you're talking about a hero. I was just trying to help. That's what makes you heroic. You didn't think about it in grand terms. You just saw someone who needed help and you helped them. Their eyes met and held. The air between them felt charged, full of words neither quite dared to speak. James reached across the space between them, and Clara met him halfway, their fingers intertwining naturally. Is this crazy? Clara whispered. Everything about this situation is crazy. Completely insane, James agreed. But it's also the most real thing I've felt in years. They sat like that, hands clasped, until Clara's phone alarm reminded her it was time to go home. As she stood to leave, James stood too, not releasing her hand. Clara, I know the timing is terrible. I know there's a power imbalance and 1,000 reasons this shouldn't happen. But I need you to know. He took a breath. You're not just someone who helped me. You've become the person I think about first thing in the morning and last thing at night. You've become important to me. Clara's heart raced. James, I feel it too. But I'm scared. Your life is board meetings and charity galas and private jets. My life is community college transcripts and helping my mom pay rent. We're from different worlds. So we'll build a new world, James said simply. One that fits both of us. Margaret noticed the change immediately. During one of her visits to coordinate Victoria's prosecution, she cornered Clara in the kitchen. I need to say something, Margaret began, her tones serious. And please don't take this the wrong way. Clara braced herself. Okay. James is a good man. The best boss I've ever had, honestly. But he's also been hurt, badly, by someone he trusted completely. Margaret's expression softened. If you care about him, and I can see that you do, please be sure. Don't start something you're not prepared to finish. He's been through enough. I know, Clara said quietly. I think about that constantly. I'm terrified I'll hurt him. Or that I'm just convenient, someone who was there when he needed rescuing. Do you love him? The question hung in the air. Clara had been avoiding asking herself that very thing. I think I might, she finally admitted. Which is insane. We've known each other for 5 weeks, and most of that time he was imprisoned in his own basement. This isn't how love is supposed to work. Margaret laughed, surprising them both. Love never works the way it's supposed to. Trust me, I've been married 20 years. My husband and I met when he rear-ended my car. We spent our first 3 hours together exchanging insurance information and arguing about whose fault it was. And now he's my best friend. The person I choose every day. Margaret squeezed Clara's shoulder. My point is, don't dismiss what you're feeling just because it doesn't fit a storybook timeline. But also, don't rush into anything. Give it time to be real. That night, Clara sat with her mother in their modest apartment, finally telling her everything. Her mother listened in silence, her weathered hands gripping Clara's tightly. Mija, her mother said when Clara finished, using the Spanish endearment from her childhood. You've always had a good heart. Too good sometimes. I worry it will get you hurt. I know, Mama. But I also know you're strong. Stronger than you think. Her mother cupped Clara's face. This man, James. Does he see you? Really see you? Not as someone who saved him, but as who you are. Clara thought about the hours of conversation, the way James asked about her opinions on everything from education policy to her favorite movies. The way he listened when she talked about her dreams. The way he looked at her, not with the gratitude of someone repaying a debt, but with genuine interest and growing affection. Yes, she said. I think he does. Then maybe this is God's plan. Maybe you were meant to be in that house, meant to hear him, meant to save him. And maybe he was meant to save you too. 2 weeks later, Victoria's preliminary hearing made national news. Clara sat in the courtroom, James beside her, as prosecutors laid out the evidence. Victoria, dressed in an orange jumpsuit, her beauty dimmed by fluorescent lights and defeat, refused to look at either of them. The case was overwhelming. Financial records, recorded phone calls, testimony from Victoria's previous victims who finally felt safe coming forward. Her bail was denied. She would await trial in prison. As they left the courthouse, reporters swarmed, shouting questions. James's security team cleared a path, but one question cut through the noise. Mr. Whitmore, is it true you're in a relationship with the maid who saved you? James stopped walking. Clara felt her stomach drop. They hadn't discussed going public. They'd barely discussed what they were to each other beyond stolen moments and held hands. But James turned to face the cameras, his hand finding Clara's, and said clearly, Clara Jenkins is not the maid. She's one of the most courageous, intelligent, compassionate people I've ever met. And yes, I care about her deeply. Any other questions about my personal life can be directed to someone who cares what you think. He pulled Clara through the crowd, into the waiting car, and they rode in silence for a moment before Clara burst out laughing. That was either the most romantic or most disastrous thing you could have done. Probably both, James admitted, grinning. But I'm tired of hiding. Tired of letting other people define what my life should look like. He turned serious. I know we're still figuring this out. I know it's complicated. But I want to figure it out with you, publicly, messily, however it needs to happen. Clara felt something unlock in her chest, a fear she'd been carrying that this was temporary, that reality would eventually intrude and separate them back into their proper social spheres. I want that too, she said, but on one condition. Name it. You stop calling yourself my employer, partners, or nothing. James smiled, the real smile she'd come to cherish. Partners. That evening, back at the estate that no longer felt like a crime scene but was starting to feel like home, They sat in the garden watching the sunset. James had his arm around Clara's shoulders, and she leaned into his warmth. "I enrolled in classes today," Clara said. "Education program, starting in January. Figured it was time to stop putting my dreams on hold." "That's incredible. Your future students are lucky." "I'm lucky," Clara corrected. "I got a second chance. A lot of people don't." "We both did." James kissed the top of her head. "Let's not waste it." As stars began to appear in the darkening sky, Clara realized that 5 weeks ago, she'd been cleaning houses and dreaming small, careful dreams. Now she was sitting in a billionaire's garden, enrolled in college, planning a future that looked nothing like the life she'd imagined. Sometimes the right door opens at exactly the right time. Sometimes courage is just putting one foot in front of the other, even when you're scared. Sometimes love grows in the strangest soil, in basements and courtrooms, in shared trauma and shared hope. Sometimes, Clara thought, you save someone and end up saving yourself. 6 months later, the cherry blossoms bloomed early in the estate's garden. Clara sat at the outdoor table, textbooks spread around her, highlighter in hand, lost in a chapter about childhood cognitive development. She was so focused, she didn't hear James approach until he set a cup of tea beside her notebook. "You've been studying for 4 hours," he said, settling into the chair across from her. "You need a break." "Final exams next week," Clara replied, but she closed the textbook and reached for the tea. "How was the board meeting?" "Productive. We're launching a new initiative, investment fund specifically for education startups. Margaret's running it." James smiled. "Turns out being kidnapped by your fiancé makes you reevaluate your priorities." Funny how that works. They'd fallen into an easy rhythm over the past months. Clara had moved into the estate, into her own wing, at her insistence, though she and James spent most evenings together anyway. She studied, he worked, and they built something neither had quite dared to name, but both understood was permanent. The media frenzy had eventually died down. Victoria's trial was set for the fall, her legal team unsuccessfully attempting every delay tactic imaginable. Clara and James had learned to ignore the occasional tabloid headline, the speculation about their relationship, the inevitable criticism from people who thought she was a gold digger or he was taking advantage. "Let them talk," Clara's mother had said during Sunday dinner at the estate, a tradition they'd started when James insisted on meeting the woman who'd raised such a remarkable daughter. "People always talk. What matters is what you know in your heart." James's phone buzzed. He glanced at it and laughed. "Margaret wants to know if we're coming to her anniversary party next month. She says, and I quote, 'Tell Clara she can't use exams as an excuse. She's family now.'" "Family," Clara repeated softly. The word carried weight. Her own family, her mother, her brother Marcus, who was thriving in his pre-med program thanks to a scholarship from one of James's foundations, had embraced James completely. His family, or what remained of it, had been more complicated. His mother had flown in from Seattle 2 months ago, suspicious and protective. She'd sat across from Clara in the formal dining room, studying her with eyes exactly like James's, and asked pointed questions about intentions and timelines. "My son has been hurt enough," she'd said bluntly. "I know," Clara had replied. "I have no intention of hurting him. I love him." It was the first time she'd said it out loud to anyone but James. His mother's stern expression had softened. "Good. Because if you break his heart, scholarship fund or not, I will find you, Mama." James had protested, but both women were smiling. Now, in the garden with cherry blossoms drifting on the breeze, Clara felt the truth of that love in every quiet moment. It wasn't the dramatic, desperate love of crisis. It was something steadier, deeper, a choice they both made every day. "I have something for you," James said, pulling a folder from his briefcase. "The legal team finalized it yesterday." Clara opened it, scanning the documents inside. Her eyes widened. "James, this is a foundation. The Clara Jenkins Education Fund. Fully endowed, managed by an independent board, dedicated to helping people from underserved communities complete their teaching degrees." He watched her face. "I know you wanted to do this yourself someday." but I thought maybe we could do it together.
Now.
Tears blurred Clara's vision. This is too much. It's not enough. Clara, you saved more than my life. You reminded me why I started building wealth in the first place, to make a difference.
To help people.
I'd lost sight of that. He reached across the table for her hand. This fund will help hundreds of people become teachers. People like you, who have the passion and intelligence but not the resources. That's not too much. That's exactly right. Clara stood, moving around the table to wrap her arms around him. Thank you, she whispered against his shoulder. Not just for this. For everything. For seeing me. Always, James murmured into her hair. I'll always see you. They stayed like that, holding each other in the dappled sunlight, until Clara's phone alarm reminded her she had a study group meeting online. Go, James said, kissing her forehead. Ace those exams. Your future students are waiting. 3 weeks later, Clara walked across a stage in a rented auditorium, accepting her associate degree in education. The crowd was small, community college graduations didn't draw massive audiences, but her cheering section was mighty. James, Margaret, her mother and brother, even James's mother who'd flown in for the occasion, all stood and applauded as Clara accepted her diploma. 2 years down, 2 to go, she told James afterward, diploma clutched in her hands like treasure. Then student teaching, then certification, then you change lives, James finished. I'm so proud of you. That evening, James had arranged a small celebration dinner at the estate. Clara's mother cooked, insisting that fancy catering wasn't appropriate for a family meal, and the house filled with laughter and Spanish music and the smell of her famous enchiladas. As they sat around the table, this eclectic, unlikely family they'd built from trauma and trust, Clara felt overwhelmingly grateful. Not for the money or the mansion or any material thing, but for this, people who cared, people who showed up, people who celebrated victories no matter how small. A toast, Marcus said, raising his glass. He'd grown confident over the past months. The scared kid working double shifts transformed into a young man with purpose. To Clara, who taught me that courage isn't about being fearless. It's about being scared and doing the right thing anyway. To Clara, everyone echoed. Later, after the guests had left and the house had quieted, Clara found James on the balcony off the master bedroom, looking out over the garden where they'd spent so many evenings. Happy, he asked as she joined him. Terrified, actually, Clara admitted. Everything's changing so fast. Sometimes I wake up and can't believe this is my life. Having second thoughts?
No.
Never. She leaned against the railing beside him. Just overwhelmed. 6 months ago, I was cleaning houses and hoping to make rent. Now I'm graduating college, running a foundation with you, living in a mansion. It doesn't feel real. It's real, James assured her. You earned every bit of it. I opened a door. You opened a lot more than that. James turned to face her fully. Clara, I need to tell you something. About Victoria. Clara's stomach tightened. They rarely spoke about her anymore. Okay. She tried to contact me through her lawyer. Wants me to visit her in jail. Says she has information I need to hear. He saw Clara's expression and quickly added, I'm not going. I told her lawyer absolutely not. But it made me realize something.
What?
I was so focused on building an empire that I forgot to build a life. I let someone like Victoria into my world because she fit the image I thought I needed. Beautiful, sophisticated, connected. He took Clara's hands. But you're the one who fits. Not the image, not the empire, me. The real me. James, let me finish. He took a breath. I'm not asking you to decide anything tonight. But I want you to know, when you're ready, if you're ready, I want forever with you. Not because you saved my life, but because you make my life worth living. Clara felt tears on her cheeks. I want that too. But I need to finish school first. I need to become the person I'm meant to be, not just the person who saved James Whitmore. I know, and I'll wait, however long it takes. They sealed the promise with a kiss, soft and sweet and full of possibility. The next 2 years unfolded like a dream Clara kept expecting to wake from, but never did. She completed her bachelor's degree while working part-time at an inner-city elementary school, discovering that she loved the chaos of a classroom full of second graders. James restructured his entire business model, moving from pure profit focus to impact investing, using his wealth to fund companies that solved real problems for real people. The Clara Jenkins Education Fund awarded its first scholarships, helping 15 aspiring teachers complete their degrees. Margaret became Clara's mentor, teaching her the business side of philanthropy. James's mother visited quarterly, gradually accepting that her son had found something real. Victoria was convicted on all counts and sentenced to 23 years in prison. Clara attended the sentencing, needing closure. As Victoria was led away, she looked at Clara one final time. "You think you won," Victoria had said. "You think this is a fairy tale." "No," Clara had replied calmly. "I think I made a choice to help someone who needed it. What happened after that was just life. Not a fairy tale. Just life." On a warm evening in late May, 2 years after that first graduation, Clara walked across another stage, this time receiving her bachelor's degree in elementary education. The crowd was larger now, not just family, but former cleaning clients who'd become friends, professors who'd become mentors, children from her student teaching placement who'd made cards congratulating Miss Clara. James sat in the front row, beaming with pride, holding a small velvet box in his pocket. After the ceremony, he took her to the garden where they'd spent so many evenings. Cherry blossoms were blooming again, the same delicate pink as that day 6 months into their journey together. "Clara Jenkins," James said, dropping to one knee as the setting sun painted everything gold. "You walked into my life at my lowest moment and showed me what true courage looks like. You've spent these 2 years becoming an incredible teacher, and I've watched you transform not just your own life, but the lives of everyone around you. I'm not asking you to be Mrs. Whitmore or to fit into my world. I'm asking if I can be part of yours. Will you marry me?" Clara looked at this man who'd learned humility in a basement, who'd used his second chance to actually make a difference, who'd loved her patiently while she found herself. She thought about the door she'd opened, the choice she'd made to answer a call for help, the impossible, improbable journey that had led them here. "Yes," she said, pulling him to his feet. "Yes, absolutely yes." They married 6 months later in a small ceremony in the garden, surrounded by the family they'd built. Clara wore a simple dress, not because she couldn't afford elaborate, but because simple felt right. James cried during his vows. Marcus was the best man. Margaret caught the bouquet and immediately handed it to a shocked James's mother. Clara's mother gave a toast that brought everyone to tears. "My daughter taught me that miracles aren't always big and loud. Sometimes they're quiet acts of courage. Sometimes they're just opening a door when someone calls for help. And sometimes, if we're very lucky, they lead us exactly where we're meant to be." 5 years later, Clara stood in front of her third-grade classroom, watching 28 children work on a project about courage. On her desk sat a photo, her and James in the garden, laughing at something ordinary and perfect. She told her students a version of her story, simplified, age-appropriate, about how she'd helped someone who needed help and how that one choice had changed everything. "Miss Whitmore." A small hand shot up. Clara had kept her maiden name professionally, but answered to both. "Were you scared?" "Terrified," Clara admitted. "But sometimes the right thing to do is scary. That doesn't mean we shouldn't do it." That afternoon, she came home to find James in the nursery, painting the walls a soft yellow. They'd found out 2 weeks ago. A baby due in December. "What do you think?" James asked, gesturing at his work. "Too bright?" "It's perfect." Clara wrapped her arms around him from behind, her hand resting on her still flat stomach. "Everything's perfect." And in that moment, standing in a house that had once been a prison and was now a home, Clara understood something profound. Fairy tales weren't about magic or fate. They were about choices, about courage, about opening doors even when you're afraid of what's on the other side. She'd opened a door in a basement and found not just a man to save, but a purpose, a partner, and a future she'd never dared to imagine. Sometimes the best stories don't begin with "once upon a time." Sometimes they begin with a single act of kindness. Sometimes they begin with a voice calling for help and someone brave enough to answer. And sometimes, if we're very, very lucky, they never really end at all.